Commander Jake Reeves had written exactly 47 complaint letters to Earth Command over the past 6 months. He knew the exact number because he had nothing better to do on Research Station Kepler 442, a godforsaken floating tin can at the edge of civilized space that smelled perpetually of recycled air and disappointment. Letter 1 had been professional, polite even. Dear Earth Command, there appears to be a scheduling error regarding my retrieval from Station Kepler 442. Letter 47 had been less diplomatic. Listen here, you bureaucratic oxygen thieves. If I have to eat one more packet of freeze-dried stroganoff that tastes like sadness and cardboard, I will personally fly this station into the nearest sun just to feel something warm again. Not his finest work, but he meant every word. What Jake did not know was that his letters had become required reading material for Introduction to Primitive Communication Systems at Xenolinguistics University on Thexara Prime. He discovered this at 0300 station time when he couldn't sleep and decided to hack into the station's communication array to see if Earth Command had responded. They hadn't, but someone else had been reading his messages very thoroughly. The screen showed an active transmission on frequency 77 Delta. Curious, Jake routed it through his terminal. A lecture hall materialized on his display, filled with approximately 60 alien students of various species, all dutifully taking notes. At the front stood a tall, crystalline being with prismatic skin that refracted light in unsettling ways. And here we observe the human's fascinating use of comparative metaphor, the being was saying in flawless galactic standard. When Commander Reeves writes that his superior officer has the personality of a stapler, we see the human tendency to assign emotional weight to inanimate objects, suggesting a deeply animistic worldview. Jake blinked, then blinked again. What the hell? He muttered. On screen, the being continued. Note the aggressive syntax in paragraph 3. The repetition of profanity indicates ritualistic emphasis, much like the war chants of the Krillian Confederacy. Jake's eye twitched. He unmuted his microphone. Excuse me, he said, his voice echoing through the lecture hall. 60 alien heads turned in confused unison. The crystalline professor froze mid-gesture. Hi, yes, hello. Jake continued, waving at his camera. Quick question. Why the hell are you reading my personal correspondence in front of what appears to be a classroom full of students? The lecture hall erupted in chittering, whistling, and various other sounds that Jake assumed constituted alien surprise. The professor's prismatic skin flushed a deep purple. Commander Reeves, she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. This is most irregular. These communications were filed under public domain research materials. Public domain. They're complaint letters to my boss. Your superior officer submitted them to the Galactic Cultural Archive as examples of human written communication 6 months ago, the professor explained. I am Professor Kickstall, chair of Xenolinguistics. Your letters have been invaluable to our understanding of human expression. Jake felt something between rage and hysteria building in his chest. You're telling me that Captain Morrison has been using my angry letters as cultural samples instead of actually responding to them? The complexity of your emotional articulation is quite remarkable for such a young species, Kickstall offered, apparently thinking this would help. It did not help. I've been stuck on this station eating food that tastes like despair, begging for a pickup, and you people have been studying my word choice. A small insectoid creature in the front row raised a spindly appendage. Professor, what does despair taste like in human culture? Is it a delicacy? Jake closed his eyes and counted to 10, then 20, then gave up. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, we're going to have a conversation about privacy and consent. And then you're going to tell me exactly what you've been teaching these poor students about humanity. Professor Kickstall's skin shifted through several colors that Jake suspected meant she was in trouble. She had no idea how much trouble. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Jake said 20 minutes later, having relocated to a proper conference channel. His coffee mug sat empty beside him, which only made his mood worse. You've been teaching a class on human communication using my personal letters for an entire semester? Professor Kickstall's crystalline form sparkled nervously in the video feed. Behind her, the lecture hall had emptied, though Jake suspected most of those students were still listening in. Not just your letters, Commander. We also analyzed your supply requisition forms and your messages to the station maintenance department. My maintenance requests, the ones about the coffee machine. Yes, those were particularly enlightening. Your passionate discourse on the failure of automated beverage systems revealed deep spiritual connections between humans and caffeinated substances. Jake's left eye started twitching again. It wasn't discourse. The machine is broken. It dispenses something that looks like coffee but tastes like industrial solvent mixed with regret. A smaller figure skittered into frame beside Chickstal. It was the insectoid from the front row, about 3 feet tall with too many legs and compound eyes that reflected light like disco balls. Oh, I translated that one. You said the coffee was garbage, which is clearly a reference to the human burial practice of composting organic matter. The machine failing represents the death of hope, which is why you perform the daily ritual of attempting to extract coffee despite knowing it will fail. Jake stared. What? No. I meant the coffee tastes bad. Just bad. Like garbage. Regular garbage. The kind you throw away. The insectoid's antennae drooped. But I wrote a whole paper on the funerary implications. Tick is my teaching assistant, Chickstal explained. He's been helping translate the more nuanced human phrases into Galactic standard. He's been doing a terrible job, Jake said flatly. I have a degree in exolinguistics, Tick protested, his mandibles clicking in what might have been offense. Then you should get a refund, because you've been teaching an entire classroom completely wrong information about humans. Chickstal's color shifted to something Jake was starting to recognize as defensive. Commander, with respect, human communication is notoriously difficult to parse. Your species uses approximately 70% more sarcasm than any other known sentient race. The literal meaning of your words rarely aligns with your intended message. That's not an excuse to make things up. We didn't make things up. We extrapolated cultural context from available data. Jake pulled up his own copy of his letters. Okay, let's do this. Read me one of your translations. Let's see how bad this is. Tick pulled up a display, his multiple limbs typing at impressive speed. Here's one from 2 months ago. You wrote to Earth Command. My ex-girlfriend was a black hole of emotional energy, and now I'm stuck on a station where the highlight of my week is watching the recycler process waste. Yeah, I remember that one. I was having a bad day. According to my translation, Tick continued proudly, you were describing an ancient human prophet who consumed stellar phenomena, and whose wisdom was so profound that you now dedicate your time to meditation while observing sacred purification cycles. The silence stretched for a solid 10 seconds. I was calling my ex-girlfriend emotionally draining and saying my life is so boring that watching the toilet flush is entertainment. Jake said very slowly, very carefully. Tick's antennae drooped further. Oh. How many of these have you mistranslated? Chickstal and Tick exchanged what Jake assumed was a meaningful look, though it was hard to tell with beings who had completely alien facial structures. Most of them, Chickstal admitted quietly. Most of them. Approximately 94%. Jake set his empty coffee mug down very carefully to avoid throwing it. So you're telling me that there are students across multiple star systems learning completely incorrect information about human culture and communication? Well, not just students, Tick said helpfully. The lectures are broadcast to 3 university systems, and there was that documentary series, and the cultural exchange program picked up some of your quotes for their promotional materials. What documentary series? Humans. Surprisingly profound. Despite everything, it won an award. Jake put his face in his hands. How many people have seen this? Approximately 400 million sentient beings across 7 species, Chickstal said. Your letter about the coffee machine has been particularly influential in philosophical circles. I'm going to need another coffee, Jake muttered. Except I can't have one because the machine is broken. And apparently that makes me some kind of martyr. See? Tick said brightly. The suffering is part of the ritual. Jake seriously considered the benefits of just screaming into the void of space. The emergency alert woke Jake at 0600, which was 2 hours earlier than he ever wanted to be awake. The message flashed red across his terminal. Priority diplomatic situation. All personnel report to command deck. He stumbled through the corridors of Kepler 442, past the humming life support systems and flickering overhead lights that had been meaning to fix for 3 months. The station only housed 12 personnel, and most of them looked as confused as Jake felt as they filed into the command center. Station Commander Voss stood at the main display, her reptilian features twisted in what Jake had learned was her particularly annoyed expression. Commander Voss was a saurian, 7 feet of scaled muscle and perpetual irritation with the universe. She'd been running Kepler 442 for 8 years and had the disposition of someone who deeply regretted her career choices. "Would someone like to explain," she said with dangerous calm, "why there are 3 unauthorized vessels requesting docking permission and claiming they're here to meet the great prophet of caffeinated wisdom?" Jake felt his stomach drop somewhere around his feet. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh yes," Voss said, her eyes fixing on him like a targeting laser. "Reeves, this better not be one of your stunts." "It's not a stunt, it's a misunderstanding, it's complicated." The display lit up with 3 distinct ship signatures. Tick's voice crackled through the comm system. "Commander Voss, this is Teaching Assistant Tick from the University Vessel Enlightenment. We're here with representatives who wish to meet Commander Reeves. It's a matter of spiritual urgency for multiple species." Voss's tail lashed behind her. "Spiritual urgency? This is a research station, not a temple." "It's about my letters," Jake said miserably. "The complaint letters. There was a translation problem." "What kind of translation problem?" "The kind where an alien translated me calling my ex-girlfriend emotionally draining as proof that I'm some kind of prophet." The rest of the command crew stared at him. Ensign Park, the station's engineer, started giggling and couldn't stop. "This is not funny," Voss growled. "It's a little funny," Park wheezed. The comm crackled again. "Commander Voss, the representatives are becoming insistent. The warrior prelate from Kryn is threatening to board by force if we don't allow a meeting. Something about honor-bound pilgrimage." Jake pulled up the vessel information on his datapad. His situation was somehow getting worse. "Okay, so apparently my letter about the coffee machine inspired a religious movement on Tick's homeworld. The Kryn are warrior monks. They take philosophical teachings very seriously. And the 3rd ship is registered to the empathic collective of Voron 5. "What's an empathic collective?" Voss asked. "Species that feels emotions really intensely and shares them telepathically," Jake said, reading frantically. "They're probably here because they were moved by something I wrote." "The breakup letter," a new voice said. Everyone turned. Professor Kixatal had materialized on another screen, Tick hovering nervously behind her. "Commander Reeves, your letter describing emotional distress after a romantic dissolution was broadcast as part of our lecture series. The Vorani found it deeply affecting. They may have misunderstood your intent. What did they think I meant?" "That you were teaching a lesson about the sacred nature of suffering. I was complaining about my ex." "Yes, well, context is difficult across species barriers." Voss's claws tapped against the console in a rhythm that suggested she was contemplating violence. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. Reeves wrote some angry letters. You used them for a class and mistranslated everything. Now we have religious pilgrims demanding to meet him because they think he's a prophet. Does that sum it up?" "Essentially, yes," Chixtal said. "And if we don't allow this meeting?" "The Kryn will likely attempt a boarding action," Tick squeaked. "They're very devoted to their spiritual journeys." "Fantastic," Voss said. "Reeves, congratulations. You've created an intergalactic incident with your relationship problems. In my defense, none of this is actually my fault. You wrote the letters. I didn't ask for them to be broadcast across the galaxy." Park had stopped laughing and was now looking at the tactical display. "Commander, the Kryn vessel just armed its weapons." "What? Why?" "They're saying if we don't allow the sacred meeting, they'll consider it a hostile act against their faith." Jake felt a headache building behind his eyes. "This cannot be happening." "Oh, it's happening," Voss said. She turned to face him fully. "Here's what's going to happen, Reeves. You're going to meet with these pilgrims. You're going to politely explain that there's been a misunderstanding. You're going to send them home happy. And then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about why you felt the need to write 47 complaint letters colorful enough to start a religious movement. I just wanted to go home, Jake said weakly. Well, you're about to have company instead. Professor Kickstall, dock your ship. Bring your mistranslating assistant. You're going to help fix this mess. Kickstall's crystalline form flickered through several colors. Commander Voss, I'm not sure. That wasn't a request. You taught the class. You get to help manage the fallout. Everyone else, prepare for visitors. And someone please make sure the Kryn don't shoot us while we figure this out. The comm line went dead. Jake looked at his fellow crew members who were all now staring at him with varying expressions of amusement and sympathy. So, Park said eventually, this is probably not the best time to mention that I also wrote some complaint letters. Shut up, Park. The docking bay of Kepler 442 had never been designed for diplomatic functions, which became immediately obvious when 3 distinct groups of alien pilgrims tried to enter simultaneously and created a traffic jam of spiritual significance. The Kryn warrior prelate was 8 feet of armored muscle and religious fervor, his species 4 arms carrying ceremonial weapons that looked uncomfortably functional. He wore robes that were somehow both religious and tactical, and his voice boomed through his helmet's speakers. I am Prelate Garn of the 7th Blade Temple. I have traveled 6 parsecs to meet the prophet of caffeinated wisdom. Where is he? Right here, Jake said weakly, raising his hand like he was back in school. Garn's helmet turned to face him. Jake couldn't see his expression, but the long silence suggested it was not impressed. You are smaller than I expected. Yeah, I get that a lot. The second group consisted of approximately 30 Varani, the empaths, who all looked like floating jellyfish made of gossamer and sensitive feelings. Their spokesperson, if you could call it that, drifted forward on invisible currents. When it spoke, everyone in the room felt the words more than heard them. We sensed your pain across the stars. Your suffering called to us. We are here to witness your sacred sorrow. It really wasn't that bad of a breakup, Jake said. All 30 Varani immediately burst into tears. The emotional feedback hit everyone in the room like a wave of sudden, inexplicable sadness. Park started sniffling. Even Voss looked misty-eyed. Please don't cry, Jake begged. It's fine. I'm fine. We're all fine. The Varani cried harder. Their collective sadness intensified. Garn's armor started dripping condensation. This is going well, Voss muttered, wiping her eyes angrily. The third group was Tick's people, about a dozen insectoids who skittered around excitedly, antennae waving. They were less intimidating than the others, but made up for it with sheer enthusiasm. One of them rushed up to Jake. Is it true that you commune with the sacred machines every morning? Can we witness the ritual? I just try to make coffee, Jake said helplessly. The ritual of caffeination, yes. Professor Kickstall entered the bay last, her crystalline form refracting the harsh station, lighting into rainbow patterns on the walls. She surveyed the chaos, and her colors flickered to what Jake was learning meant deep regret. Perhaps we should move to a conference room. Perhaps, Voss agreed through gritted teeth. You should fix this before I have you all ejected into space. 20 minutes later, they'd assembled in conference room B, which was really just a glorified storage closet with a table. The Varani floated near the ceiling, still occasionally weeping. Garn stood like a statue, arms crossed. The insectoids skittered around excitedly. Jake sat at the table across from Kickstall and Tick, wishing desperately for the broken coffee machine. Okay, Jake said. Here's the situation. There's been a massive translation error. I'm not a prophet. I'm not teaching sacred wisdom. I was just complaining about my life because I'm stuck on this station and want to go home. The room fell silent. Then Garn spoke, his voice somehow managing to sound both disappointed and threatening. You are saying your words were meaningless? Not meaningless, just not prophetic. They were personal complaints. But the suffering, one of the Varani whispered. We felt such profound suffering in your words. That was just regular human breakup sadness. It happens to everyone. The Varani burst into fresh tears. The emotional wave hit again, stronger this time. Jake felt tears running down his own face for no reason. This is ridiculous, he said, crying. Why am I crying? I don't want to cry. Your pain is universal. The Varani sobbed. It transcends species. It transcends nothing. It was just a bad relationship. Tick raised a spindly leg. But my translations were completely wrong, Jake interrupted. You made me sound like some kind of philosophical genius when I was just being sarcastic and annoyed. Garn's forearms tensed. So there is no wisdom in your words? I mean, maybe accidentally, but not on purpose. You would deny your own teachings? They're not teachings. They're complaints. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Varani were producing enough tears to create a humidity problem. Garn looked ready to draw his ceremonial weapons. The insectoids were chittering in confused distress. Chixtal's colors flickered rapidly. Perhaps there's another approach. Commander Reeves, what if you performed a ritual? Something to help them understand human communication properly. What kind of ritual? A sacred communication ceremony. You could read one of your letters, explain the actual meaning, demonstrate proper translation. We could turn this into a learning experience. Jake stared at her. You want me to do a cultural presentation to convince them I'm not a prophet by acting like a prophet? Well, when you put it that way, it sounds contradictory. Voss leaned forward. It sounds like our only option unless you want me to try explaining to Galactic Command why we shot at religious pilgrims. Jake looked around the room at the expectant faces, floating jellyfish, and armored warrior. And you think they'll actually listen? The Kryn respect ceremonial displays, Chixtal said. The Varani need emotional closure. The Thexarians want to witness human ritual. If you give them a proper ceremony, explain everything clearly, perhaps they'll accept the truth. And if they don't, then we're in the same situation we're in now, except you'll have tried. Jake closed his eyes. He thought about his 47 letters, his terrible coffee, his broken-down station, and his desperate desire to just go home. He thought about how none of this was supposed to be his problem, but somehow had become exactly his problem. Fine, he said finally. Fine. We'll do a ceremony. But if this goes wrong, I'm blaming all of you. Noted, Voss said. Garn's armor clinked as he straightened. The human agrees to perform the sacred ritual. This is acceptable. The Varani stopped crying. We will witness. The insectoids chittered excitedly. Can we take notes? Absolutely not, Jake said. This is not going in anyone's thesis. The ceremony was scheduled for 2200 hours in the station's main assembly hall, which Jake had never actually seen used for an assembly before. Mostly it was where they stored spare equipment and played zero-gravity handball on slow weeks. Now it was filled with aliens, observation equipment, and far too many expectations. Voss had insisted on security protocols. Park had rigged up some atmospheric lighting for ambiance. Chixtal and Tick had prepared translation equipment. Jake had prepared himself for disaster because at this point, disaster felt inevitable. Remember, Chixtal said, her colors cycling through what Jake now recognized as anxiety. You're trying to demonstrate authentic human communication while explaining that your previous communication was misunderstood. It's a delicate balance. You're asking me to be both genuine and performative at the same time. Yes, that's impossible. You're a human. Your species specializes in impossible social situations. That's not a real thing. Tick skittered up, carrying a data pad. I've prepared the selected text for the ceremony. We'll start with the coffee machine complaint move to the emotional letter about your former mate, and conclude with your most recent supply requisition where you requested items that don't exist just to see if anyone was reading them. Jake blinked. I forgot about that one. It was very enlightening. You asked for a working coffee machine, a one-way ticket home, and the meaning of life in that order. The juxtaposition was poetic. I was being sarcastic. Yes, well, that part was lost in translation. The assembly hall's doors opened. The pilgrims filed in with the solemnity of people attending something important. Garn took position at the front, his armor gleaming. The Varani floated in a cluster, their translucent forms catching the atmospheric lighting in unsettling ways. The insectoids scrambled for the best viewing positions. Other species had joined too, word having spread through whatever networks aliens used. Jake recognized at least 4 species he'd never seen before. Is that a news crew? He asked, pointing at a group with recording equipment. Galactic Educational Broadcasting, Tick confirmed. They heard about the ceremony and wanted to document it. Of course they did. Why not? Let's broadcast my humiliation to the entire galaxy. That's the spirit, Tick said, completely missing the sarcasm. Jake took his position at the front of the hall. A podium had been set up, because apparently that was important for ceremonial purposes. His datapad sat on it, displaying his letters in all their complaining glory. He looked out at dozens of expectant alien faces and experienced a moment of pure existential dread. "Hello," he said. His voice echoed through the hall. "Thank you for coming to my ceremonial attempt to explain that none of this is ceremonial." Not his best opening, but it was honest. "We will begin," Kixtel announced, with Commander Reeves reading selected communications while providing cultural context. "Please hold all questions until the designated question period." Jake pulled up the first letter on his datapad. "Okay, so this is from 4 months ago," I wrote. "The coffee machine has finally given up all pretense of functionality. It now dispenses a liquid that I can only describe as hot sadness. I have lodged 17 complaints about this machine. 17. At this point, I think Earth Command is using my suffering as some kind of experiment." He paused. "What I meant by this was that the coffee machine is broken and nobody has fixed it despite multiple requests. The hot sadness part was a joke. Humans use humor to cope with minor frustrations." Tick's translation equipment lit up, converting his words into Galactic Standard and several other languages. Jake watched the alien faces for reactions. Garn raised one of his forearms. "But the sacred nature of your repeated complaints suggests ritual significance." "No, it suggests I really wanted coffee." 17 attempts. 17 is a sacred number in Kryn philosophy. "That's a coincidence. I just kept asking because nobody fixed the machine." The Varani rippled with confusion. "But we felt the depth of your despair." "It wasn't despair. It was annoyance. Mild annoyance. On the human scale of emotion, this was maybe a 3 out of 10. "Then why describe the beverage as sadness?" "Because it tasted bad and that made me sad. But like, temporarily sad. The kind of sad that goes away when you do something else." The insectoids chittered amongst themselves. One called out, "So the funerary implications were incorrect?" "There were no funerary implications. It's just a broken appliance." This wasn't going well. Jake could see the confusion spreading. He'd somehow made things more complicated by trying to explain them. "Let's try another one," he said, scrolling to the next letter. "This one is about my ex-girlfriend." I wrote, "Dating someone with the emotional range of a teaspoon was bad enough. Dating someone with the emotional range of a teaspoon who then blamed me for her emotional constipation was worse. I'm better off stuck on this station watching the recycler work. At least the recycler is honest about being full of crap." The Varani immediately burst into tears. The emotional feedback slammed into everyone like a physical force. Jake felt his own throat tightening with sympathetic sadness. "No, no, no," Jake said desperately. "This is not a sad letter. This is an angry letter. There's a difference. Your pain transcends language." The Varani wept. "It's not transcendent pain. It's petty relationship drama. Every human goes through this." Garn stepped forward. "Are you saying your teachings apply to all humans?" "They're not teachings. But if all humans experience this suffering, it's not suffering, it's just life. Normal, regular, boring life." The news crew was recording everything. Park was trying not to laugh in the corner. Voss looked like she was contemplating which airlock to throw Jake out of first. Chixtal's colors were cycling through what had to be some kind of alien panic response. Jake made a decision. Possibly a stupid one, but at this point, what did he have to lose? "Okay, everyone stop," he said loudly. "Just stop. This isn't working. You want to know the truth? The real truth about human communication?" The hall fell silent. "We're terrible at it," Jake said. "We use sarcasm to hide feelings. We joke when we're hurt. We complain about small things because we can't face the big things. These letters? They weren't profound. They were me being lonely and frustrated and stuck on a station where nothing works and nobody listens. That's all they were." He felt something shift in the room. The Varani stopped crying. Garn's posture changed. The insectoids went still. I miss Earth, Jake continued, his voice quieter now. I miss coffee that tastes like coffee. I miss talking to people who understand when I'm joking. I miss my family. I even miss my ex-girlfriend sometimes, which is stupid because we were terrible together. These letters were just me throwing words into space, hoping someone would care enough to respond. The vulnerability felt strange, uncomfortable, but also somehow right. So no, I'm not a prophet, I'm just a guy who writes complaint letters. That's the truth. The silence stretched. Then, impossibly, Tick spoke up. The translation equipment just did something weird. It translated your last speech with 98% accuracy. Everyone turned to look at the insectoid. When you stopped performing and just spoke honestly, the meaning came through clearly, Tick said, his antennae waving. I've never seen the equipment work that well on human speech before. Honesty transcends translation barriers, Jixtal said softly, her color shifting to something that might have been understanding. Commander Reeves, you've just demonstrated the most important lesson about communication across species. Truth requires vulnerability. Jake wasn't sure if he felt validated or manipulated, but he was too tired to care. Garn stepped forward. For a terrifying moment, Jake thought the warrior monk was going to challenge him to combat. Instead, Garn placed one massive hand on Jake's shoulder. You have taught me something, human. Not about coffee or suffering or sacred rituals. You have taught me that sometimes wisdom is just honesty. That is enough. The Varani drifted closer. We understand now. Your pain was real, but it was not meant for us. We apologize for intruding. The insectoid skittered forward. Can we still take notes? This would be great for my revised thesis. Absolutely not, Jake and Voss said simultaneously. The ceremony concluded at 23:30 hours. The pilgrims departed with what Jake hoped was satisfaction and understanding, though he suspected at least 3 of them were still planning to write papers about him. The news crew had gotten their footage and left. The station slowly returned to its normal state of quiet dysfunction. Jake found himself in the observation deck at 0200, unable to sleep again. The stars looked the same as they always did, indifferent and distant. He held a cup of actual coffee, brought as a gift from one of the departing vessels. It tasted incredible. He almost cried. Mind if I join you? Professor Kickstal's voice came from the doorway. Station's technically public space, Jake said. Can't really stop you. She drifted to the viewport, her crystalline form casting fractured light across the deck. I owe you an apology, Commander Reeves. You think? I knew the translations were wrong. Jake turned to look at her. What? Not all of them. Not at first. But several weeks into the course, I realized that Tick's interpretations were becoming increasingly disconnected from probable human intent. I checked his work against other translation protocols. The discrepancies were obvious. And you kept teaching the class anyway? Kickstal's colors shifted through several shades Jake couldn't interpret. I convinced myself that the mistranslations were revealing deeper truths. That even if you didn't intend profound meaning, the act of searching for meaning was valuable. I told myself we were learning about the complexity of interpretation rather than learning about humans. That's academic doublespeak, for you knew it was wrong, but it made good teaching material. Yes. At least she was honest. Jake took another sip of his actually good coffee. Why are you telling me this now? Because your honest speech today reminded me that interpretation without accuracy is just creative fiction. I was using your words as raw material for whatever lessons I wanted to teach. That wasn't fair to you or to my students. No, it wasn't. I'll be issuing formal corrections to all the course materials. Tick will undergo additional translation training. The documentary will be updated with clarifications. It won't undo the damage, but it's a start. Jake considered this. What about the religious movement? Garn has agreed to return to his temple and explain the misunderstanding. The Varani are already processing the emotional closure. The Thexarians will be disappointed but resilient. Tick's thesis is completely ruined, which he's devastated about, but he'll recover. Good. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Can I ask you something? Kickstal said eventually. What will you do when you finally get home? Jake thought about it. Drink good coffee, see my family, maybe write a letter to Earth Command explaining exactly how badly they screwed up. The usual. Will you write more complaint letters? Probably. It's therapeutic. Would you be opposed to me reading them? With your permission this time? Proper translations? Academic honesty? Jake laughed despite himself. You want to keep studying my complaints? Your unfiltered communication style, yes. It's genuinely valuable for understanding human expression, but only if you consent, and only with accurate interpretation. I'll think about it. That's all I can ask. Another silence, more comfortable than the last. Professor, Jake said, out of curiosity, what did you actually learn about humans from all this? Kixtel's colors flickered through a pattern that might have been amusement. That you're simultaneously more and less complicated than we thought. That your sarcasm is a defense mechanism but also a bonding tool. That your complaints often mask deeper needs. That your capacity for humor in difficult situations is remarkable. And that given the choice between maintaining a comfortable fiction and speaking an uncomfortable truth, enough of you will choose truth to make it culturally significant. That's pretty accurate, actually. Thank you. It only took completely embarrassing myself and creating an intergalactic incident to figure it out. Hey, we all learn somehow. The comm system chirped. Voss's voice came through, sounding tired. Reeves, report to command deck. Earth Command finally responded to your messages. Jake's heart rate kicked up. After 6 months of silence, Earth Command was finally responding. On my way. He set down his coffee cup with care, suddenly not wanting to leave it behind. Want to come? This should be interesting. Are you sure? You wanted to study human communication. This is about to be very human communication. They made their way to the command deck, where Voss had the message queued up on the main display. The timestamp showed it had been sent 3 weeks ago, still faster than most of his previous correspondence had been answered. Here goes nothing, Jake said, and hit play. A crisp Earth Command officer appeared on screen, looking far too well rested and clean to be real. Commander Jake Reeves, Deep Space Station Theta 7. We have received and reviewed your communications dated. She rattled off a list of dates spanning 6 months. Your reports of station malfunctions have been forwarded to the appropriate maintenance scheduling department. Your requests for relief assignment have been noted. Your concerns about the diplomatic situation have been reviewed by the Xeno Relations Committee. Jake felt a familiar resignation settling in. After careful consideration, the officer continued, Earth Command has determined that your continued presence at Station Theta 7 serves a valuable diplomatic function. Your position has been officially redesignated from temporary assignment to cultural liaison posting. Congratulations on your promotion to senior commander. Your new assignment duration is 3 years, with possibility of extension. Supply shipments will resume on the attached schedule. We appreciate your service. Earth Command out. The message ended. Jake stared at the blank screen. Behind him, he heard Kixtel's colors shifting rapidly. Probably concern or sympathy. 3 more years, he said flatly. With supply shipments, Voss offered weakly. And a promotion. Maintenance Unit 7 added, having wheeled in from somewhere. Jake walked to his terminal and opened a new message window. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then he began typing. Dear Earth Command, thank you for your message dated. He checked. 3 weeks ago. Received today due to the inherent delays in deep space communication that you seem to have forgotten exist. I acknowledge receipt of my promotion and redesignation. I note with interest that this new posting comes with supply shipments on the attached schedule, though no schedule was actually attached to your transmission. I can only assume this is either incompetence or a cosmic joke, and given my experience with Earth Command, I'm genuinely unsure which. I further note that you've promoted me to a cultural liaison position after I accidentally started a religion, misunderstood a philosophical movement, and became the subject of a doctoral thesis based almost entirely on mistranslations. If this is Earth Command's standard for cultural liaison work, I shudder to think what our other diplomatic posts look like. That said, I accept. Not because I want to be here, I don't, Not because I think Earth Command has made a good decision. You haven't. But because apparently, against all odds and my better judgment, I've managed to figure out something here. Maybe it's that honest communication matters. Maybe it's that even screw-ups can turn into something useful. Maybe it is just that I've gotten used to the coffee being terrible and my standards have adjusted accordingly. So yes, I'll stay. I'll be your cultural liaison. I'll write my reports and my complaints and my increasingly unhinged letters. I'll try not to accidentally start any more religions, but I make no promises. But I want 3 things in return. 1. Send actual coffee, real coffee, not the synthetic crap. I've tasted the real thing again and I can't go back. 2. Send a competent maintenance crew. Maintenance Unit 7 does his best, but he's literally holding the station together with improvisation and what I'm pretty sure is hope. 3. Read my damn reports. Actually read them. Someone, somewhere in Earth Command, needs to understand what's actually happening out here, instead of just checking boxes and making terrible decisions based on incomplete information. If you can manage those 3 things, we'll call this a fair deal. If not, well, I'll still be here, complaining, because that's apparently what I'm good at. Senior Commander Jake Reeves, Deep Space Station Theta 7 Cultural Liaison, apparently. He read it over once, made no changes, and sent it. Feel better? Voss asked. Surprisingly, yes. What now? Kickstall asked. Jake thought about it. 3 more years on this station. 3 more years of malfunctioning life support, communication delays, bizarre diplomatic incidents, and terrible coffee. 3 more years of complaint letters that probably wouldn't change anything. But also 3 more years of quiet observation decks, of learning about alien cultures, of figuring out how to bridge gaps he hadn't known existed. 3 more years of actually meaning something, even if it was in the strangest way possible. Now, he said, now I go back to the observation deck and finish that good coffee before it gets cold. Tomorrow, I file a maintenance report about the water reclamation system. The day after, I probably deal with whatever new diplomatic incident is heading our way. Same as always. That's it. Voss sounded almost disappointed. That's it. Did you expect something more dramatic? I don't know. A rousing speech? A new perspective on life? Some kind of profound realization? Jake smiled. Here's my profound realization. Sometimes you're stuck somewhere you didn't want to be, doing something you didn't plan to do, and you just have to make the best of it. That's not dramatic. That's just life. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Voss, when the supply shipment arrives, assuming it actually does, make sure someone checks it carefully. With my luck, Earth Command will send 3 tons of synthetic coffee and call it close enough. I'll put it on the checklist, sir. Jake left the command deck and returned to the observation deck. His coffee was still warm. The stars were still indifferent. Station Theta 7 still made concerning noises somewhere in the ductwork. But somehow, it felt a little more like home. He pulled out his personal data pad and opened a new file. Complaint letters, Year 2. Then he started typing again, because old habits died hard, and honestly, the bathroom in Section C really did need to be fixed. Outside the viewport, a small ship passed by, its lights blinking in the pattern that meant friendly greeting in Thixarian. Jake raised his coffee cup in return, knowing they couldn't see him but doing it anyway. 3 more years. He could do 3 more years. Probably. Maybe. Well, he'd complain about it either way.